Okay, so this probably looks like the most uninteresting black stitch ever, but I want to show you this one because it's really useful if you want to do tiny little details, and if you should want to move on to shading your black work, which we will do. But this is the stitch to use basically, and I used it in my Blackwork tiger piece. I'll show you that here now, and it's in the eyes of the tiger, and they're very small, and it means you can get quite a densely stitched area still in a counted stitch and get some shading in as well. So that's why I wanted to show you this stitch. So it's not a difficult stitch because it's not very big for a start off, and it is the smallest stitch that you can do on any count that you choose to do, so it's worth knowing about this one. And I've worked a little bit of it here. So it just consists of a stitch across every thread. Basically you're using every hole and you're just going from one hole to the next hole, and you can see I've worked a row of squares here, and then you can work a diagonal stitch across the square, and then if you want another one, a diagonal stitch the other way. So you're getting a very tiny stitch but very solid, and you can choose what combination of that you want. So I'll show you how to put that together. So I think if you work your squares first, and they are just squares, so you can do them horizontally or vertically, whichever way you find the easiest. Just because I read from left to right, I find it easiest to stitch from left to right. But so you can put, I suggest all the squares in first actually, because then you can see how densely it's coming out and how many extra stitches you might want to add in. So put all your little squares in first, and you can see I'm just coming up in one hole, over a thread and down in the next hole, so I'm not missing any holes out here. It's a stitch over every thread in every hole. It's the smallest one you can do. But because this is on a slightly larger count Ada, you can still see between the stitches. If you were doing this on something like a 35 count linen, which is what the tiger is done on, then you probably wouldn't be able to see between these stitches. This square alone would be enough. But the larger the count, the more you will see. So you might want to add in the extra stitches. So just work these squares first. Just going back and forth, you don't need to start from the same side each time. Just fill in the whole space with the squares. Quite a nice stitch on its own actually. You can use that as a stitch if you want to, but we're going to continue on with it on this occasion. So I'm going to stitch these all the way to the bottom, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we add the extra stitches. Okay, so just going along the bottom now. No compensating to do really in this one because it's just every hole and it's so small. Maybe a bit at the edge, but there, just get that vertical one in. So there's all my little squares. So that's quite dense already, but if we want to make it even darker, then we can put a diagonal in, so it's almost like half a cross stitch if you're a cross stitcher. So I'll go back up to here, and then I'll start adding in that half cross, and you can see how much darker it suddenly becomes. So if you wanted to use it a bit more creatively, you could do it darker in the centre, so you could do your squares all over. Do this one that I'm doing now just in the centre, and then not at the edges, and you'd get kind of that dark pupil right in the middle and the lighter part on the edge. I just want to show you how dark it goes. Just finish this row, and then we'll go back and put another row in. You can still see a little bit of the white linen underneath, the white Ada underneath. So that's with half cross in it, so you can put another half cross the other way, so you've put a cross stitch over the box basically. So we'll go back along that row we've just done, going the other way now, which should make it completely solid, which it does. So if you just want it all filled with no fabric showing through. You might ask what's the point of counting it if you can't see any of the fabric through it, but you can still see the shape of the stitch. The thread has a sheen on it, it will pick up the light, so you'll still be able to see a pattern in it. I'll have to look quite closely, but so there's that centre very dark there, and you can see those final white areas have disappeared all together. Just do one more over the top. So I'll leave the middle two really dark, I think, and leave the outer ones just with half a stitch over it, just so you can see the difference. So if you've got something very tiny you want shading, this is the stitch to use. Okay, so you've got the three different parts to it there. So you've got just the squares, which is quite open, then you've got the squares with half a crossover, which you can still just see a bit of the fabric, and then I've done two rows with a full cross stitch over, so that's the most dense stitch that you can actually work in the centre, which makes it completely dark. And you can use a combination of those three to help you shade your projects. Hope that's been helpful.